Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is Tuesday, March 17th, 10:19 a.m. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all you drunks in Boston. And we are going to talk about the newest issue of Europe walking away from responsibility in the Strait of Hormuz. So let's get right into that. And as we said, there are a couple issues going here, and I'm sure you've seen these headlines, and I know for sure the social media has covered that we are now transitioning the title more to US and Israel's war than ever before and making it not Europe's problem. And because of that, the European countries and a few others are declining to help escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That sounds reasonable on the surface if you frame it as the US and Israel's war, but it's wrong. What we're watching right now is not a failed coalition. You are watching a test. The United States does not need Europe to escort tankers. There are three United States carrier battle groups. I think all at least Nimitz class, which is three of the Death Star. So we'll be honest that the U.S. has more iron, more logistics, and experience to handle moving a couple of ships up and down the corridor while the Iranians throw rocks at them. Okay, there are other things there, but let's greatly diminish Iran's capacity to engage in warfare because it has been greatly diminished. So, why does President Trump go yesterday and ask for allied help to go and escort different ships through the canals? Because the request itself is a message from Trump. And when the U.S. asks, will you help secure global trade? What it's really asking is, are you willing to share the risk or just the benefit? Very true. And now we have the answer, much the same as President Trump got during the State of the Union when he says to the Democrats, will you stand with me and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Will you stand against the most horrendous activities being inflicted upon U.S. citizens? And they would not. And we had the answer then for the Democrats, and now you have the answer for Europe. Europe didn't say no by accident, though. They said no because their incentive program is different than ours. For Europe, the war in the Gulf has been energy shocks, but that's their own failed policy, but now they're feeling it. They have domestic instability, which they imported, and political backlash from the 7 or 8 sober people in the country. And what do they gain by joining this coalition of escorts? On paper, very little. So they reframe the situation. They say this is the US and Israel's war. Well, that's not the analysis. You guys are going to argue with me, but that's positioning. It's creating distance. It allows them to step back without openly breaking alignment, fracturing NATO, et cetera, et cetera. And there's something else going on here that people aren't looking at, and it is the timing. We are heading towards the US midterm elections. Foreign governments understand that. They know policies, strategies, commitments are going to change. Either way, if the Republicans keep control, which they probably will, don't listen to our news media. Local news will tell you a different story. They are hoping to get Joe Biden 2.0 going, or they're hoping to get, well, it wouldn't be for the president anyway, but they are hoping to get enough Congress and Senate where the president is constantly being brought up on charges. So he'll be ineffective. That is the goal for most of Europe, to have that happen. So he cannot have another W. I'll say that personally. The paperwork, the analysis doesn't really say that, but I'm saying that they need everything to go back to the way things were. So they are avoiding tying themselves too closely to a strategy that they know would be different a year from now, but it wouldn't be needed in a year. I'm giving it 6 months. And that's not ideology, that's risk management. Sorry, I'm a little around the board on it, but when your allies looking for you to fail, I mean, actually looking for you to fail, not like what you hear about Timothy Chalamet not winning the Oscar. Who cares? So that's the story with Europe. What I find distasteful, of course, is they keep up the US and Israel war against Iran as if we were working for the Israelis. which is furthest from the truth. We'll point it out if we have to, but only if you are willing to accept the information. So he also talked to China and Russia, or brought it up. He didn't talk. He said, "Hey, China and Russia, you could probably get into this too." And they both declined, but they had two different reasons for it, which was China needs that Gulf oil. They prefer not to pay for anything because they're in a financial ruin right now, getting worse. And they don't want to speed on, another nail in their coffin, which be U.S. dominance of Iranian oil supply. So they're not going to help. Russia is more philanthropic at this point because Russia has had its embargoes loosened, so they are supplying more oil to Europe than probably in the last couple of years. So they're all happy little clams. They have no reason to help for that reason. They're making money. So this is where it gets interesting. So the U.S., if you have not followed Donald Trump at all, you probably are a little lost, or if you've gotten everything you learned about him from Orange Man Bad. Once again, we are not saying he is the God Emperor, but there are things that he does that he has used from his days in business, which he's using here too. If the U.S. becomes the primary escort force in the strait, it does not control global trade, which will be what everybody's starting to cry. It will shape the environment in which it is done. And that matters more than people realize because this will affect insurance costs, transit speeds, and risk exposure. And what would be the effects? Well, one, you're inside the US security umbrella, which means low premiums, fast movement, and predictable turns because let's say from 10 to 12, we do transit. So we know every day from 10 to 12, we're going to do transit. If you're outside of that, none of those things are yours anymore. Higher costs are yours, delays are yours, uncertainty is yours. Because if we move 10 ships a day, we're not going to go and move an 11th ship if you're a dick, right? So that's not a formal tax, but it functions like one. Okay, so now one of the parts that people are missing on this is if you choose not to participate, you do not lose access to the strait. You do lose your influence with the United States. You don't get to help decide who gets escorted, how routes are prioritized, how the system is structured. And later on, you have less standing to complain about it. That's not punishment. That's just how the system works. Being a member has its perks. Those who carry the load write the rules. And it is something that Europe is not learning from Trump. He says it to them every couple of days. But what we're seeing here is something bigger. The West is no longer operating as a single unit. The US is moving towards active control of strategic checkpoints. Europe is moving toward risk avoidance and strategic distance. It's got to stay out of the fight. It doesn't have anything to be in the fight with. China is going to benefit without committing, and Russia benefits from this disruption. So this is not a unifying thing for all those idiots. It is a divergence. So let's go to the original claim about this being US and Israel's war. It is not. This is a test of who is willing to sustain the system that global trade depends on. And now we know who it is. Some people are going to act, some people are going to wait, and some people are going to benefit without contributing. And over time, the ones who step forward will decide how that system is going to be run. And global trade, if you are not learning about it, like all of us are learning about it, because there are so few people who actually understand it completely, it's a fucking mess, are getting the idea. This belt and trade has so many chinks and weaknesses in it that it is a laughable pursuit at this point, but it has to continue for the Chinese because they're committed to it. What the United States is now doing with its coalition building, and it has built more useful coalitions in the last year and a half than anything it's done with Europe in the last decade. We're seeing now that our allies don't have any maritime power, right? That the Iranian Navy could have probably taken out the English Navy in a fight in the ocean, possibly also the French. That should scare some people. That the people that think they're in charge of the world, because they still do, could be stamped out by a bunch of third world Islamists. Very true statement. So I'm glad we're coming to the point where we're asking for these proofs that you deserve to be part of the governance issues. And once again, hats off to the Arabians because they are actually doing the right thing again. They don't have the ships to do it before everybody starts. They don't really have that kind of a navy. They got a couple little things going, but they stay out of the ocean whenever possible, unless it's on a giant yacht. And they're doing their job. Everybody's doing their job, but the Europeans. And people are trashing, and I'll end on this because it's going too long. People are trashing Australia for them not joining us on that. Well, Australia is still part of the Commonwealth. I know, guys, I know. Still part of the Commonwealth. So you have probably other leverages being moved against you to stay out of that. But they are also a member of the Quad Alliance. So every ship that they keep in the Pacific watching the Chinese, we're happy for. That's about all for this. So those of you who are on Instagram and TikTok saying, blah, 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 the Jews are running the show, and that's why we're not doing anything. And I'll tell you once again, you should be embarrassed the way a lot of these people talk, but that's just me. So have a good day at St. Patrick's Day in the United States, which is a day for problem drinkers everywhere. And that'll be about it. Goodbye.